Okay, welcome everybody to LPC's webinar on best practices in open access publishing. This webinar is part of a series put on by the Professional Development Committee. So if you have feedback or ideas for future webinars, please get in touch with me, this is Melanie Schlosser, or with Kevin Stranick, who is the current chair of the committee. A few logistical notes before we get started. You'll notice that your microphone has been muted automatically. When we get to the Q&A portion, please feel free to unmute and speak up. You can also use the chat function to ask questions or to comment at any time. I will be reading those aloud for our presenter and for folks who are calling in on phone lines. Also, please note that we're recording this webinar and we will make it freely available on LPC's site very soon. So getting into our topic for today, according to the most recent library publishing directory, 82% of library publishing programs are either entirely or primarily publishing in open access. And the remaining 18% do so at least some of the time. So while open access isn't universal in our community, it's certainly a major focus. The Open Access Scholarly Publishers Association is a strategic affiliate of LPC, and we rely on them for a broader view of the open access publishing landscape. Our speaker today is Claire Redhead, who's been OASPA's executive director for the past 6 years. Last year, Claire participated in an LPC roundtable discussion with the Directory of Open Access Journals on OA publication quality. And afterwards, I did an informal poll of our membership on their involvement with and interest in OASPA. One of the things that came out was that there was interest in learning more about the work that OASPA does and their role in helping to support high quality open access publishing. So I asked Claire to speak with us today with 3 goals in mind. 1, for us to learn more about what's happening in the larger world of OA publishing. 2, for us to learn more about OASPA. And 3, for Claire to have a chance to learn more about what open access looks like in library publishing. So please do speak up during the Q&A period. This is very much meant to be a conversation. So with that, I will thank Claire for presenting to us today and hand over the mic. Claire, it's all yours.
Thank you, Melanie, and thank you for the invitation to speak to you all today about OASPA. I'm going to talk about our membership processes and some of the work that we're doing. I recently presented for Spark members in a webcast, and I'm reusing a couple of slides from that, so I do apologise to any of you who also tuned in, but I am going to talk about slightly different things. And also, just to add, I'm at home right now. It's 4 o'clock here in the UK, and my kids just got in from school. Now, that on the strict instructions to stay out of the way, but if you hear anyone shouting questions about what's going to be for dinner tonight, it's unlikely to be one of your side. It's probably my kids. So just to explain that, I'm sure that's not going to happen. So just to begin then, global trends in open access publishing. Let's get some context. So at the end of last year, a working group for Universities UK released a report which is entitled Monitoring the Transition to Open Access. And this report's part of a series which is taking a periodic snapshot of the progress being made. And although it focuses on the UK, it puts the figures for the UK in a global context. And so I think it had some useful information. So I thought I'd share a couple of things with you in case you aren't aware of the report. But I've included the hyperlink on these slides, so you can look it up and have a browse through the full document if you'd like to, even just at the headline information, which I think is quite interesting. This is quite a detailed chart, and you'll need a minute, I guess, to take in the information. But the important thing here is that the light blue block, the proportion of subscription-only journals, has gone down from 2012 to 2016. So more journals are offering immediate OA globally, and it's currently at just over 60%. In this next chart, we see that the biggest rise has actually been in hybrid journals. So that's the titles, as you know, that offer an immediate open access option alongside the traditional subscription articles. This sample here is of just 40 publishers, but the general picture is very similar. And this is the natural result of subscription publishers responding to mandates that require immediate open access and allowing their regular authors to comply. But it's important to note, APCs for hybrid journals are higher. On average, they're nearly 30% higher for hybrids than they are for fully open access journals. As subscription costs also continue to rise, hybrid open access may increase the financial burden on institutions. So we saw we have 60% of journals offering immediate OA, but what's the uptake? Well, we're looking at about 20% of the global output being published as open access. But still, therefore, around 80% of that is published within the subscription system. So delayed OA is included in that as well. As well as the UK, several countries in Europe have got strong OA mandates. Germany, Austria, Sweden, Norway and Switzerland all have a strong national stance on OA. The Netherlands also recently published a national roadmap for their target of 100% open access, and it's coupled with a desire to move researchers towards open science practices too. Some of these countries are also testing offsetting agreements, but as these focus on publishing immediate open access in hybrid journals as well, rather than fully OA titles, I think there are question marks around the long-term viability of this approach. So although offsetting agreements might present a short-term solution, they could ultimately be driving those hybrid figures and costs upwards. On the book side, here in the UK, there's a possibility of an open access mandate for books in the UK, which would come into force within the next decade. And this has been discussed a lot recently. You may have seen discussions on it yourself, as it raises questions about how the model will be financially supported. I won't need to tell you that the situation for scholarly monographs is quite different to journal articles, particularly outside of the STEM fields. But there seems to be a look towards library publishing and so-called new university presses, and a proposal for there to be support in place for those kinds of emerging publishing models. So it actually could present a very interesting new phase for organisations like yours within the LPC membership. And it certainly seems like in the UK, that's where some of the funds might be invested. So OASPA was set up 10 years ago by a group of people who were coming together at the same meetings and facing similar challenges. And they wanted to move the conversation from, is this a good idea or not, to how can we do this and make it work? And things have changed a lot since then. Open access has become a mainstream option and definitely making strides in the right direction. But as we can see from these charts, probably not as fast as we hoped. And we're not necessarily looking for open access at any cost. At OASPA, we're looking for there to be a diverse offering of open access options, which is sustainable in the long term. There's still a lot of work to be done. So what work is OASPA doing in this space? Well, first some background on OASPA for those of you who aren't so familiar. As you know, we're a membership organisation. We have around 130 members and they're very diverse, and this reflects the way the open access publishing landscape is today. This diversity is something OASPA supports and really wants to see continue. Our members vary a lot in size, in business model and geographic location, but they've all got open access in common. They range from individual scholars running a journal in their field of expertise through volunteer effort. We've got commercial or non-profit professional publishers of all types and sizes, and then other organisations as well who provide services in some way to support open access. These points here show the main areas OASPA is working within, guided by the mission that was set out by the founding organisations. And one of the key drivers for setting up OASPA as a formal association was for publishers to help each other and also to make sure that standards within open access publishing are high. Each year we hold a conference on open access publishing, you might be aware. It's also celebrating its 10th anniversary this year. And it's in that same spirit of collaboration. So we take a look at what's happening in the open access publishing industry around the world, innovations and trends in the industry. But it's a friendly space where stakeholders can come together and share experiences and learn from each other. This year, the conference will be in Vienna, but in 2016, we held the conference in Arlington, Virginia, and we do hope to return to the US soon. So if you aren't able to make it, we record all of the presentations and they're available shortly afterwards on our website. So you can browse all of those if you visit our conference page and have a look at what interests you. Critical to OASPA is our own application process. Every year, the number of applications we receive goes up, and reviewing them is a process we invest an awful lot of time into. All of the applications we receive undergo an initial screening against our criteria, and then a report shared with our membership committee, which is made up of a number of different publisher representatives, for a second review and a collective decision. This process often involves going back to the applicant with a list of things they need to address in order to meet our requirements. And not actually that many applications meet our criteria when they come through. Even the well-intentioned ones are usually missing something. We review our criteria regularly based on experiences that we've gained and the need to adopt to new business models. And we worked at the end of last year on making the requirements clearer and improving the guidance that we provide through the application form itself, to try and make sure that more of the applications we're screening have actually got those key points in place when we first look at them. So the form now gives some immediate feedback to applicants on entries which might not comply. Although our application acceptance rate is low, you can see here it's less than 10%, we do provide information to the applicant on the areas that they need to improve. And if a publisher is genuinely committed to making the improvements, then they can reapply and we will reconsider them. We work directly with publishers wherever we can to guide them through making the necessary changes. And I often hear from our applicants actually that they do find the process helpful. What I thought I would do for you is take a look at some of the criteria points where we regularly provide guidance and hopefully some additional clarity for you all on these. So our fully OA publication requirements. At the moment, at least one open access journal book needs to be CC BY, or currently we permit CC BY NC. And we're also looking for evidence of regular publication, so it's not a case of one book, one open access book, and that's it, you're in. CC BY is the preferred license as it gives the widest possible reuse, but we are open to discussion about more restricted licenses for books in particular. We know this is more complex, and generally I think for books we're looking for a Creative Commons license of some kind, if I think back over the applications that we've accepted. Crucially, the license needs to be fully described in the guidelines, and the wording needs to match the license chosen with a link to the terms. And the license needs to be included on all of the published material. So often I look at applications where the license is missing from the PDFs. And this, again, it may be an obvious thing, but PDFs, they're downloaded from the website. That article needs to contain all of the information that a user needs to provide a citation, provide a proper attribution, and to know how they can share and reuse the content. They're not going to go back to the main website and have a look at the policies that are listed. And so often you see the PDFs nicely embedded in the page, but you have to remember they're going to be shared and they're going to be downloaded. Information provided about the publisher. This is an area we're really looking for transparency. So who owns the press or the publisher? Who's responsible for running it? How's the operation funded? And where's it based? We'd expect an address and contact information for at least one named individual. And this is the kind of thing where when we have looked at questionable publishers, that kind of detail is lacking or very unclear. Next, information on the peer review process. So we require some sort of independent external reviewing outside of the institution. We would like to know how the reviews are selected. Are they suggested by the author? Are they selected by the board? We'd want a clear policy statement describing the review process used. It can be single blind, double blind, open review, whatever you decide. It doesn't matter as long as you make it clear what that process is. And this last point might seem obvious, but it does come up. Oh, sorry, I've skipped ahead to the wrong slide. Owners or financial benefactors shouldn't be involved in editorial decision making. So, yes, editorial boards, apologies. Is the board large enough to cover the scope of the journal and handle the volume of papers? Do you have some input outside of the main institution? For board members, are you listing the departments, the expertise, anything you can add here to show their relevance to the subject? And be clear on what the role of the editorial board is, because it does vary a lot. We often contact board members for their feedback, particularly to check their level of involvement and to help determine what's happening with the peer review process. And I know that the DOAJ also looks into editorial board involvement too. So make sure you use your boards and refresh them if you need to. So with finances and fees, again, this is somewhere where we're looking for clarity and transparency. What fees are charged? If you don't charge any, be clear on that as well. But a general statement, if the financial support is provided by the institution, we don't need details, but general statement will be sufficient for that. And this is just a few other key areas. So, do you have clear editorial policies covering conflicts of interest, plagiarism, and COPE is a good place to go for guidance on this. What's your method of archiving or preservation? Should the publications no longer be supported by your website? We would recommend that you join Crossref and assign DOIs. Again, that might be an obvious thing for your community. And finally, we spot check the content. So we can't look at everything, and we don't make judgments at the subject level, but we do look for papers or books being well written generally and well structured. So these are the main things that we're covering. I mentioned we've reviewed the criteria and the information, and we now provide a checklist format, which this is the page you would land on before launching the application form itself. And so we're hoping that more people will read this and make sure that they have the right things in place. And we hope that this format is a bit more easily understood. So if you click on Apply to Join in the menu under Membership on the OASPA website, this is what you would see. But I've included the link here, so we have our full criteria listed out as well on a separate page. So just thinking then about our membership and about open access publishers in general, once a publisher is an OASPA member, we expect them to stick to our membership criteria and to follow our code of conduct. And we're looking for a commitment to demonstrate the highest standards at all times and to the spirit of open access. We have a complaint and investigation process, which is also publicly available on our website. So if we do receive any reports that are of cause for concern, then we have a set process which we follow. And this hasn't happened very often, but it has on occasion. Beyond OASPA, we continue to focus on standards, best practice and transparency, helping anyone with open access publishing. So I mentioned our scholar publishers, who are usually the academics running a journal in their field of expertise. They're volunteers, they're on volunteer efforts, sorry. Most often they don't have access to any publishing support unless their library can provide that. So that's something that we often help with through the application process. But there were some recurring problems we've seen coming up, and often these scholar publishers are using OJS, so we have worked with PKP on making some changes, which hopefully will address some of those problems and provide some initial guidance when journals are being set up. We also run a series of webinars for our members, much as LPC does for you. These are in areas where we often see the most confusion, so licensing, copyright, ethics. We hold these for our members in the first instance, but we do make them all publicly available in the resources section of our website. So again, something to visit. You might find some resources in there that are useful for you. So we collaborated with COPE, the DOAJ and the World Association for Medical Editors on a joint statement with the snappy title of Principles of Transparency and Best Practice in Scholarly Publishing. And this sets out best practice for all journals. So this is not just open access. And we're working on having this translated into other languages. But we recently produced an infographic, which is what I'm showing here. This is hosted on the COPE website, and I've hyperlinked from this image. So please do contact me if you'd like these slides afterwards, or look this document up on the COPE website. And I've just enlarged one section of this on peer review as an example to show you the level of guidance it goes into. I thought you might find this a useful resource, and the majority of things here also match up with our OASPA membership criteria. So our activities go beyond our members and beyond open access. New publishers and publications are popping up all the time, and we're really not saying at OASPA that there's one way of doing it, there's not one model to follow or one particular price. Quite the opposite, actually. We're open to a variety of approaches, And we feel the diversity in the landscape, as I mentioned before, is something really vital and something to protect. What we do look for is transparency. And that's what a lot of the points on this relate to on this infographic. So can authors and readers find the information that's important? And is it clear what services the publisher is offering? That way they can make an informed choice between publishers, as you would do in other industries. One thing I haven't spoken about here is predatory publishing, and that's because of a few reasons. Not least that out of the hundreds of applications I've looked at, there haven't really been that many that were a huge cause for concern. So I'm not really sure of the scale of the problem. What I see more than anything is a lack of awareness of certain standards, and this applies to publishers large and small, and it's definitely not something limited to the Global South. I see applications from institutions worldwide which are being run by someone without publishing experience usually. I've got a publishing background, and that's what I draw on when providing guidance and reviewing applicants, but plenty of institutions are now in a position where someone may be considering publishing their own material and perhaps don't have that background expertise. And even with our applications, sometimes it's the case that the person maintaining the publishing website is so familiar with the layout that they can't see how difficult information might be to find. So sometimes during the application process, we're providing that fresh pair of eyes for them. So in this vein, another collaboration we've been involved in is Think, Check, Submit, which you may have come across before. This is a cross-industry campaign which we've worked on with publishers and other publishing organisations. Again, it's based on spreading awareness of what's good practice in journal publishing, and it aims to provide a checklist for researchers or library staff to help with a self-assessment on unfamiliar titles. The website visits for this campaign, I received the stats recently, and they went up dramatically through last year, which I think shows there is a real need for support in this area. And the usage statistics actually show that the most site visits come from the US. Over 30 translations of this checklist are now available, but it's still very much open for feedback. We've tested the checklist for usability by people unfamiliar with journal terms, and can definitely see that there are areas that need further improvement and refining. It's to be expected that not everyone outside of the publishing industry is going to know what constitutes best practice in peer review and what you should expect to have displayed on a journal website. We're going to add some pop-ups and some further guidance from the main points on the checklist, but the message is it's important to take a bit of time to make sure that work and research is being submitted to a trusted place. Definitely one of the many plus points of open access is that the quality of a publication is much easier to detect because everything's visible and open. And it certainly makes my life easier when I'm carrying out our application reviews. The key things are to try and be impartial and not make any assumptions, good or bad. There's plenty of good quality open access, and at OASPA we're helping to keep the standards high. New models and processes are being tried out, and we really think this experimentation is a good thing, but information needs to be clear on exactly what's being offered. The OASPA membership criteria is also really an evolving thing itself. It's undergone major revision twice since I joined the organisation, and we need to make sure that it keeps up with the changing pace of scholarly publishing. We were challenged recently when we looked at a journal where the content was based on GitHub. This was a journal that was aimed at improving reproducibility in science. We did accept this journal for membership, but it challenged our notion of what is a journal. As I said, we're very open to new models and ways of doing things. Often what we're looking for is that transparency about what is being done rather than saying it has to be this particular way. So if you think OASPA membership sounds interesting, but perhaps our criteria don't seem to fit with an aspect of what you're doing, please do feel free to contact me for a discussion. Maybe things are a better fit than they seem, or maybe your approach is something we haven't considered, but I'd be very interested to hear from you. Thank you. Thanks, Melanie.
Thanks, Claire. We're going to move to a Q&A section in a minute. Feel free to put questions in the chat. I'm also going to turn off the recording when we get there. I did want to kick it off with one question for Claire before we stop recording, which is, Claire, can you say a little bit more about the Creative Commons requirement for OASPA membership? library publishers are big Creative Commons users and tend to encourage the publications we work with to use it. But we also will frequently leave the ultimate decision on whether or not to do so up to our publishing partners, who may have a variety of reasons for not wanting to use an open license. Can you say a little bit more about the importance of that and why it's something that you insist on for membership, and what kind of exceptions exist?
Yeah, it is. I know that it's a controversial thing in some circles, and it is one of the criteria that I think wouldn't change. The board feel very strongly about CC BY, particularly for STM journal articles, that this allows reuse as widely as possible without restrictions. Also, I've questioned this myself, and I've spoken to people from Creative Commons, and I've asked them, how often do problems occur because a less restrictive license has been used, and it seems to be very small. The non-commercial restriction, I think I don't see that going away anytime soon. So I think there's probably a couple of people on the board that would like to get rid of that. But I think overall, on balance, this is why we have such a varied board, because we can debate these issues. The areas where I know that there's been more flexibility, I know that in monographs in arts, humanities and social sciences, this is where other license types have been permitted, and that's why I kind of referred to, we would look for a Creative Commons license. But there's also opportunities for splitting licensing within a document. So yeah, if it comes down to using an image that has a different license, then that's something we would talk about. But the restrictions over the content itself, we have actually, there's a post about this on our website, on our blog. It's called Why CC BY, and it goes into the problems with the share alike license and the no derivatives. It might be interesting for your members to have a look at that. But yeah, it is something that is one of the things that I don't see changing anytime soon.
Thanks, Claire. That's helpful. I'm going to turn off the recording now and open the floor for questions.